I'm Janilee Abrikian. I'm the General Manager of PALS Jamaica. We started as Peace and Love in Schools, and then down the road we started to get many demands and phone calls. Why aren't you also working in the communities and in the wider society? So we had a name change to Peace and Love in Society, but the PALS still works for both. And I know we're going to concentrate on our program in schools. We were formed in about 1994. Work the math. Program implementation perhaps started maybe a year after that. And trust me, as they say in Jamaica, trust me, it was a whole heap, a great deal of trial and error. Because while we had had some training in conflict resolution in terms of the skills and the techniques and the strategies from the Peace Foundation in Miami, they did not do school implementation programs. So we were on our own. When it started, it was out of concern because of violence in our society. And 25 years later, that concern is still there and has been exacerbated, intensified, because we still have not eliminated violence from our schools. I think one of the major characteristics of how the violence has increased is that some of the incidents have become graver. So you talk about death, whereas in the early years, I don't remember in the mid-90s us really working with schools where there had been a fatal stabbing, for example. So that's a characteristic of what characterizes our schools in some instances. And of course, some of the things that we do when we have training workshops is we look at what do principals inherit, what is inherent in that inheritance of taking over a school. So what factors already predispose that school community to violence? We have, let's call them modules. So your fundamental one is managing conflict and violence in schools. So your home is dysfunctional and there are high levels of conflict, which sometimes, unfortunately, result in a violent act. And what you're doing that has been positive changes nothing. You need to backtrack and understand the why of it and the causes of it. So that's what we're talking about. So when you understand that the way you communicate is ineffective because you're putting down the person, or you're making the person feel even more marginalized, okay? That can be a conflict trigger. When you have a child who feels that you blame without getting the information, these are things we know, but we get stuck. We get stuck in that dynamic of conflict that can't be solved. So in this fundamental course, you look at core concepts like the role of perception, right? So when you and I don't agree about something, sometimes it's not about right or wrong. It's about how you see it, and it's about how I see it. So the moment that light bulb goes off, because we taught it to you and we made you practice it, understanding it in different scenarios, you're going to say, but hold on. This one here is not about right or wrong. It's how me see it and how you see it. So let's agree to disagree. Conflict done. Right? If that relationship is important to you, that's what you're going to do. If it's not important to you, you can say, so me see it and me right. Go on about your business. And the relationship is severed. Now, most of us do not want to sever our relationships. So all of those are concepts that we teach in a workshop to different target groups. And all the workshops are such that they are realistic and people practice on real life situations. Transforming school culture is another one. And this is about a school has a culture, just like any other organization has a culture. So how do we do things here? Do you do what you want, you do what you want, you do what you want, or do we all have a single culture? And when you have a fragmented culture working in a school, it works against what you want to achieve. Similarly, creating a nurturing school climate. you can compare walking into the homes of two friends or the offices of two different companies. And when you walk into one, you feel welcome. It's intangible, you know, but you feel it. Okay? When you walk into your friend's home, which is welcoming, you could put your feet up on the living room center table. Not that you would do it, but you feel that way, don't you? You feel, you know what? If me get tired, me too sleepy and me can't drive home, I will just lie down right here and I'll sleep because my friend won't mind. So it's a welcoming, inviting atmosphere. And you have another friend and you only visit that yard because you have to, duty. The moment you walk in there, there's tension or there's some element of dysfunction that is tangible or intangible. So that's climate. It's in schools as well. So what kind of classroom climate does a teacher engender? There's a great deal of responsibility on the shoulders of a teacher to model the kind of behaviors that he or she wants. Another one is responding to inappropriate student behavior. This is what makes teachers pull their hair out. You know, you can't keep still. The other child shoots out a bad word. Many of our children are easily triggered. Most of them, unless they do the PALS program, don't know their conflict triggers. Then there's behavior management, which has become very big for PALS. We didn't start there, but it is very associated with the whole field of alternative dispute resolution. In the last 7 years or so, we've got funding through various USAID programs to do behavior management programs, both community-based, where students from different schools would come to one center. That happened in West Kingston. Or we targeted two schools like Denhamtown High and St. Andrew Tech, and they came to one venue. Or the very last one, the latest one, was 5 schools across 4 parishes. For me, very exciting because we had opportunities to pilot test the curriculum we're using with the students. We had primary and high schoolers, and then we had youth from the community, so we're able to pilot test those activities that we wrote for them and improve on them. And it also provided an opportunity to engage parents. We had volunteers on the program, which is a big feature of our program. Residents from Denhamtown and Tivoli Gardens who actually learned the whole conflict, all the concepts that we were teaching. Then there's another module which schools need, is effective school-wide discipline. How do you really achieve that? What are you doing now? What's your vision? What are the tools out there? Me, I believe in reinventing no wheel. Any tool, survey, instrument that I can find that we've had to pay for, we are using. You understand? It's there. So no school has an excuse for saying they cannot assess the culture, or they cannot assess school climate, or they can't assess how leadership is doing. The tools are there, okay? If they really want to be brave and face what the weaknesses are, their strengths. So there's no need to panic. Anger management is huge for schools. So sometimes they'll call, and in the conversation, when you try to get them to prioritize on what the most pressing presenting problem is, it turns out to be anger management. And the last one, which I like to leave because people remember it, is a framework called the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps are physical safety, psychological safety, policies, programs, and partnerships. So we went with this framework to many schools, and we've had sensitization workshops to groups of principals. And Dunoon liked this 5 Ps framework. And what they did was they created a committee for each of the Ps. One of the Ps that I hope whoever's looking at this will really like as well, and it's a partnership with student groups. Why is this useful? Very simple. Students know why the conflict started. They know among the students what caused the violence. So you have these resources, you have these founts of information that are ready, and they can also suggest how these things can be prevented, managed, or eliminated. And there are many other ways to use students. But some school cultures shy away from that. We don't have enough student engagement. I would like to think, like anything that is new being introduced anywhere, you have to have an oversight body. Now, this oversight body is going to be constituted according to your resources, numerically. But not only numerically should you look at. So it must be small enough to engage all the needed people, depending on what the initiative is. In the school, it should have a senior teacher. It should have perhaps a vice principal. Principal can't be expected to be on every committee. So it's small enough to be manageable, but large enough to include major players. We call it the PIC, Program Implementation Committee. That's a working phrase for it. Schools can do what they want with that. They could call it a safety committee, especially with the critical incident management thrust from the ministry. You found that one of the things schools had to do was create a critical incident management team. So the guidance committees are also a good vehicle to have the relevant people. You have to know who your stakeholders are. You have to be disciplined about meetings, generating reports, keeping stakeholders updated. In the stakeholder groups, you're going to have stakeholders that, boy, even if they don't lift a finger to help you, you better tell them what you're doing and make sure they know every month what you're doing. You have people who are the opposite of that. They don't have any status or power, but they want to help in every way possible. Our philosophy is that schools need to be able to sustain a PALS program after we pull out. So over the years, we have put more and more responsibilities on school teams to roll out programs. We work with those PICs initially, and the extent of need varies. And then, of course, we work with the principal so that we get to know what the issues are and what needs to be addressed. And then we train teachers and we coach teachers. So we don't just train them and leave you out to dry. We also provide workbooks. We created our own workbooks for the primary school level. We have not created our workbooks for high school because we haven't been able to find the funding, but there are books from abroad that are very suitable. So those are all the good things interspersed with a few examples of challenges. We're an NGO, so there is no kind of, it's not a fairy tale in store for us. We have to work very hard at getting funds and programs. There's no question that PALS business model needs to be reviewed in terms of how do we continue to survive. There's no question that the need is still out there. How do we get Ministry of Education, Ministry of National Security to be more than partners in name? How do we get a regular subvention from them? And of course, we need to look at succession planning to see how the organization continues to exist. But right now, we are excited because we're learning from new programs.